Some wounds arrive in silence like a deep cut that doesn't bleed. You don't scream, you don't cry. You just sit there motionless, trying to understand what just happened. Maybe you were betrayed by someone you once trusted with everything. Maybe you were humiliated in public or left behind right when you needed someone the most. That feeling isn't just pain, it's a hollow kind of emptiness, like a part of you was ripped away and thrown into the dark. And then in that moment of stillness, a quiet question echoes in your mind. What am I supposed to do with this pain? You could scream, strike back, try to prove you're not as weak as they think, or you could do the harder thing, stay silent, and begin a journey they never imagined you were capable of. Because the truth is, the people who hurt you can't truly break you. They don't have that power. They may scrape the surface, but the deepest part of you, the place where your strength, resolve, and peace live and peace live, that part is yours alone to protect. They might think you've collapsed. They might hope you'll become bitter, broken, or lost in hatred. But what they never counted on is that you choose a different path, not to fight back, not to prove anything, but to rise above it all. You don't need to say anything. No long post. No effort to make them feel guilty. Just silence and forward motion. Every step you take is your answer. Every quiet move is your statement, and eventually you'll come to see it's your calm that made you untouchable. There's a hard truth we all have to face. Not everyone who hurts you is evil, but most of the people who cause you pain simply don't care. And it's that indifference that cuts deeper than any physical wound. At first you try to understand, you make excuses for them, blame yourself, and wonder what you did wrong. You believe that if you were just a little kinder, a little quieter, a little more forgiving, things would have turned out differently. But eventually you come to realize their cruelty was never a reflection of your flaws, it was a mirror of their emptiness. And that's when something shifts in you, not with a scream, but with a quiet stillness that settles over your mind. One day you wake up, look back at everything, and feel no need to explain. You no longer crave understanding, no longer wait for apologies, no longer hope they'll make things right. Instead, one truth stands out clearly: you gave them the power to define you, and now it's time to take it back. The moment you no longer need anyone to validate your worth is the moment you enter a whole new phase of your life. A silent kind of growth. A peace that doesn't come from the outside, but from within. They didn't destroy you. They simply stripped away the illusions you once carried, the belief in unconditional love, in goodness being reciprocated, in someone always being there if you were just good enough. That truth hurts. But it's necessary, because only when you see things for what they really are can you finally start walking your own path. You're no longer someone who needs to be protected. You've become the one who protects yourself through clarity, through boundaries, and through a quiet but unwavering withdrawal. 1. Revenge isn't an action, it's an evolution. There will be times when you feel the only way to reclaim your worth is to make them feel the pain they gave you. You think that if they saw how much you're hurting, they'd feel remorse. If they saw your anger, they'd finally understand. But then you realize those who once dismissed you don't listen with their ears. They only see with their eyes, and their eyes don't register what can't be displayed. Then comes another revelation: any act rooted in the need to make someone pay will inevitably drag you down to their level. You might win an argument, but you'll lose your peace. You trade your inner calm for a fleeting emotional release. And once everything settles, the only one left exhausted is you. So instead of reaching outward to retaliate, you start turning inward to rebuild. Not in ways the world can see, but in quiet ways only you notice. The way you learn to stay silent when every part of you wants to scream. The way you remain still when everything inside is shaking. The way you keep moving forward even when no one's watching. And slowly you stop needing to be seen. You no longer crave proof. You don't need anyone to acknowledge your strength, Because you begin to understand real strength doesn't come from the noise you make, it comes from the silence you're willing to walk through. True revenge isn't about tearing someone down. It's about standing in a place they can no longer reach. Not because you're above them, but because you've outgrown the emotional space you once shared. What once triggered you now feels empty. You hear the same words that used to pierce your heart and feel nothing but stillness inside. People might look at you and say you've forgiven them. But the truth is, you don't need to forgive anymore, because there's nothing left to forgive. You've moved so far beyond that moment, so far beyond what happened, that you no longer feel the need to return. And that is evolution. No one sees you getting revenge because you never did. You just moved on. But the way you moved on, the way you live in peace, with strength and sovereignty, is the clearest response of all. No words, no proof needed. The life you live speaks for itself. That is the highest answer, not in action, but in presence, not in confrontation, but in distance, not in winning, but in rising. 2. Pain is not a chain, it's the anvil that forges your will. Pain shows up like a wrecking force. It doesn't knock. It doesn't warn. It bursts in and turns everything you once believed to be solid upside down. It makes you question yourself, twist your beliefs, blur even the clearest truths. But after all the shaking and shattering, something quiet begins to happen. You're no longer who you used to be. At first you think you've broken, but in truth, you're being reshaped. Every disappointment, every abandonment, every moment of disrespect, it's not a blow to destroy you, but a strike on the invisible anvil that's forging a steadier version of you. No one sees it, but you feel it clearly. Something inside you is solidifying, strengthening, growing more resilient with time. No one escapes pain, but not everyone comes out of it transformed. Some let pain become a chain, pulling them backward, tying them to resentment, clouding their vision, making the future feel like a threat. But others choose differently. They let pain become fire, not to turn them cold, but to teach them how to keep themselves warm, not to harden them, but to make them unshakable. It's through pain that you learn how to stand when everything around you falls apart. You learn how to stay silent when no one understands. You learn how to keep walking, even when there's no hand to guide you. And most importantly, you learn how to stop begging for things that were never worthy of you. This change doesn't happen overnight. It's like the sea slowly shaping the rocks, quiet, patient, but impossible to resist. One day you'll look back and realize the things that used to shatter you no longer get a reaction. Not because you're numb, but because you finally understand those wounds aren't enemies anymore. They're markers of lessons learned, maps of a journey, proof that you survived something that could have broken you. And so, what once caused you pain becomes part of the strength you carry now. Not something to hide, but something you bear like a finished sword, no longer sharp from anger, but from having survived the fire. Pain doesn't hold you back. Whether you carry it or let it go, that's your choice. But if you're brave enough to face it, to listen to what it came to teach you, to stop running from it, it's no longer a burden. It becomes your foundation. And on that foundation, you rebuild yourself quietly, firmly, with no need to prove anything to anyone. You just live in alignment with what you now know is real. 3. Silence isn't weakness, it's power. Sometimes the strongest response isn't a word. It's total silence. There were moments when you wanted to scream. You wanted to defend yourself, argue back, make someone understand how wrong they were, how deeply they hurt you. But then you stopped. Not because you had nothing left to say, but because you finally understood. Silence has its own language, and sometimes it says more than words ever could. Silence is not surrender. It's a conscious choice not to give someone another chance to manipulate your emotions. When you stop reacting, they lose the ability to control you. When you remain calm, they're forced to face their own emptiness. Silence belongs to those who have made it through their inner storms. It's not for the cowardly, it's for those who've been wounded enough to. Not every battle needs to be fought, and not every comment deserves a reply. There are conversations you walk away from, arguments you let drift by like the wind. Not because you lack the words, but because you've stopped living to meet someone else's expectations. You understand now the ones who needed to hear you already did. The ones who chose not to understand you could explain forever and still get nowhere. Silence is also how you reclaim space for yourself. It's the quiet withdrawal that protects your energy. It's the unspoken reminder that you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. People often admire loud voices, but they don't realize it's calm in the middle of chaos that truly shakes the world. When you don't react, don't explain, don't try to convince you're showing you've stepped beyond their reach. Your silence is a mirror. It forces others to see themselves not filtered through your reactions, not softened by your words. And that discomfort they feel, it's because they have no one left to blame, no one to pull back into the storm they're used to. Silence isn't avoidance. It's a boundary. It's the refusal to invest more emotion into something that's no longer worth it. It's an invisible line that no one can cross without respect. When you choose silence, you're not disappearing. You're simply no longer showing up in places that don't deserve your presence. And when you walk away without a sound that lands heavier than any door slammed shut. So never underestimate the power of silence. It's not empty. It holds a quiet kind of strength, the right to protect your peace in a world constantly demanding your reaction. 4. You don't need to be recognized, you just need to free. There's a phase in life when all you want is to be understood. You live kindly, you act with integrity, you follow your values not for reward, but because you believe that if you're good enough, others will eventually see it. But day by day, you come to realize something: not everyone sees it. Not everyone wants to understand. And not everyone has the depth to feel the depth in you. And when you keep waiting for kind eyes and acknowledgement from people who lack the sensitivity to truly see you, you unknowingly bind yourself to a version of life that's not yours but theirs. You stop living by what's right and start living to fit into the expectations of people who were never capable of truly defining you. Until one day you grow tired. Not because you've abandoned your values, but because you've realized being seen by eyes that never really saw you is not worth the cost of your inner peace. So you stop searching. No more forcing explanations. No more trying to be understood. You start to live lighter. And strangely, it's in that exact moment when you no longer need recognition that you become free. Free from judgment. Free from playing the role of someone strong. Free from the urge to prove your worth just to be loved. You no longer feel the need to justify why you pulled away, why you stayed silent, or why you turned down half-hearted connections. Because you know, true freedom doesn't come from being understood, it comes from no longer needing to be. And so you begin doing small things simply because they feel right to you. You don't wait for applause. You don't wait for validation. You live with quiet in your mind, and in that quiet, you hear something clearly. You don't need a tone to tell you you're enough, to know that you are. The strange thing is, when you stop chasing others' approval, you begin to meet yourself more honestly. You don't live to fulfill expectations, you live to breathe freely. Not to stand out, but to feel at peace. Not to be better than others, but to stay true to yourself. Letting go of the need for recognition doesn't mean letting go of your worth. On the contrary, it's when you start guarding it more fiercely than ever, but without the need to display it for anyone's admiration. You understand now, true inner strength makes no noise. It doesn't crave applause. It only requires a soul quiet enough not to be shaken by empty noise. And once you reach that kind of freedom where you no longer need to be understood, accepted, or agreed with, everything shifts. You're no longer dragged by things beyond your control. You begin living by your own rhythm. And that is the quietest form of power no one can take from you. 5. The ones who leave are hidden gifts. When they left, it may have felt like your whole world collapsed. No warning. No closure. just a sudden emptiness and a string of unanswered questions. You once blamed yourself, thought you weren't good enough, worthy enough, something enough to make them stay. You saw their departure as a personal failure. But over time, as the pain slowly faded and perspective returned, you looked back and realized they didn't leave to punish you. They left to free you. Because if they hadn't walked away, you might have stayed stuck in an old version of yourself, one where you had to shrink to fit in, stay quiet to keep the peace, sacrifice to hold on to something that was never really yours. Their departure, as painful as it was, gave you space to see clearly. Who truly stays when you have nothing to offer? Who values you when you stop trying to please? And who was there only for what they could take, not for who you really are? It's a cruel truth that we often only see these things when it's all over. But maybe that's the gift, because some doors only open when we've been hurt enough to stop clinging to what's not meant for us. You once called it loss. Now you understand it was purification. Real love doesn't walk away because you're not perfect. And those who turn their backs so easily, maybe they were meant to be gone long ago. When someone suddenly leaves your life, you may fall apart for a while. But in the end, the space they leave behind is not meant for you to fill, it's meant for you to breathe again. No more forcing, no more pretending, no more proving yourself to keep someone who was never truly yours. You begin rebuilding yourself not to win someone back, but to never lose yourself again. You enter a season where you don't need many people around, just the right ones. Not a crowd, just enough. And one day you'll look back on the departure you once cursed, and you'll smile. Not because it stopped hurting, but because you're grateful. Grateful they left before you completely lost yourself. Grateful they helped you realize you had been living to hold on to others while forgetting to hold on to yourself. Grateful that their absence brought you back to your own presence. Life has a way of clearing out what no longer fits, even when you're not ready. The ones who leave are not enemies. They're unnamed gifts. Maybe not wrapped in kindness, but carrying lessons you couldn't have learned any other way. 6. You don't need their apology, you just need to let go. We often believe that in order to heal, we need an apology, some acknowledgement, someone to come back, look us in the eye and say, I was wrong. But eventually, with enough time, you realize some apologies will never come, not because they don't owe you one, but because they lack the courage to face it. They lack the awareness to grasp the depth of hurt they caused. They lack the maturity to take responsibility. And then you're left with a choice. Hold on to the wound while waiting for something that may never come, or open the door yourself and walk out of that emotional space. Forgiveness, at its core, has never been about excusing someone else. It's about freeing yourself. Freeing the part of you that keeps repeating the question, why me? Freeing the part of you still waiting for an explanation to finally let go. Freeing yourself, the one who carried that pain so long it started to reshape you in ways you didn't even recognize. When you release the expectation of an apology, you're not accepting injustice. You're simply refusing to let resentment dictate the rest of your life. You're saying no to someone who's no longer present, continuing to occupy space in your mind. Forgiveness doesn't require conditions. It doesn't depend on someone else's attitude. It's a quiet, unwavering decision that you will no longer live one more day as a victim. That you don't need anyone else to make it right for you to move forward. That emotional freedom matters more than wounded pride. You don't need them to recognize your worth. You don't need them to understand how deeply they hurt you. Because you've moved so far past that point, so far you're not waiting anymore. Not for them, only for yourself. And when you no longer look to someone else's words to feel at peace, something shifts. You start to feel lighter. You breathe deeper. You no longer feel that tightness in your chest when you think about what happened. You stop bringing it up. You stop needing to guard yourself behind armor. You've simply moved on quietly, steadily, at your own pace, slowly enough to heal without rushing. No apology can undo the past. No response can erase what's been done. But the past doesn't need to change. You just need to stop being stuck in it. Letting go isn't failure. Letting go is the highest form of growth. It's when you understand that inner peace is worth more than any word spoken from outside. 7. Inner discipline, the backbone of strength. Not everyone who is strong is cold, and not everyone who stays silent is indifferent. Some people walk through storms without showing a single crack, not because they don't feel, but because they've learned to place discipline above emotion. They don't let pain steer their direction. They don't let anger take the wheel. They don't let someone else's words knock them off course. You might think discipline sounds like restriction, but in reality, it's the conscious choice to keep your power in a world where everyone's easily swept away by passing emotional waves. How many times have you said something in anger, only to regret it later? How many times have you explained, argued, reacted, only to realize you were pouring your energy into something that changed nothing? Inner discipline doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you feel fully without being dragged by it. It's knowing you're angry, but not letting anger speak for you. It's recognizing you're hurt, but still choosing to act with kindness. It's wanting to give up, but holding on for one more day. You can't control the world outside, but you can always start with one thing: controlling yourself. Every time you choose not to react instantly, every moment you hold back from a bitter reply, every instance you stay silent when it would be easy to lash out, you're not getting weaker. You're quietly forging a stronger core. People often think strength shows in muscles, in volume, in visible wins. But the quietest strength lives in self-control, in being able to walk away from chaos with your dignity intact, in not needing to win every argument because you're focused on a bigger victory: mastery over yourself. Discipline doesn't mean you're always right, always logical. It means that even in your weakest moments, you don't let go of what's right. Even when you're tired, you don't compromise what you know in your soul is wrong. Even when no one sees or applauds, you hold firm to your principles, as if your soul were watching every step. And in time, you begin to see something. The peace you now have didn't come from luck or others changing. It came from you no longer being shaken by every shift around you. Inner discipline is an armor that hides emotion. It's the spine that keeps you upright through every storm. It's the solid foundation that lets you stay grounded, not because you're hard, but because you've become deep enough not to be moved by what's shallow. No one walks through pain without scars. But some scars don't make you ugly, they make you real. They're proof that you've been broken, that you've fallen, that you've sat silently through moments that felt unbearable, and yet you stood back up, kept moving, and lived on with a heart that didn't turn to stone. You're no longer who you used to be. You no longer tremble at a cold glance. You no longer need an apology to feel peace. You no longer seek validation to know your worth. You didn't rise by standing above others, you rose by stepping out of the cycle they're still stuck in. They can't hurt you anymore, not because they've changed, but because you no longer place yourself where they can reach you. They no longer control your emotions because you've reclaimed ownership of your mind. They no longer appear in the story you're writing, not because you erased them, but because you've moved on to a new chapter, one where they no longer have a role. And in that new chapter, you stop chasing the old idea of victory. You don't need revenge. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to remind anyone of the pain they caused. Because now, you know not reacting is the clearest answer. The stillness within you is the strongest reply. You walk lighter. You speak less. You live deeper. And with each passing day, you're not trying to become someone, you're simply returning to yourself, a version that pain can no longer destroy. That is victory. Not by defeating anyone else, but by rebuilding yourself stronger, clearer, and less fragile than before. When you no longer seek to win out there because you've already won within, that's when you become truly free. And you'll realize you don't need anyone to call you strong. You don't need applause for surviving, because you didn't go through all this for praise. You went through it to stop living in the shadow of who you used to be. You went through it to become real, silent, steady, untouchable. No revenge, no escape. Just this simple truth. You can't be reached anymore.